I'd just like to say, if you search up Fade to Black Bendy book and scroll down, my video will pop up. Anyway, but that's not important. Let's get to the actual video. The year is 1953, and we follow our main character, Rose, who is 17, as she procures a new job at some television studio in New York. It's at this studio that Rose meets none other than Joey Drew. Joey Drew, with the help of Nathan Arch, mostly Nathan Arch's money, is now producing a show called The Joey Drew Show. The Joey Drew Show is basically a show where he talks about his cartoons, and then he'll play a few cartoons at the end. It's basically reminiscent of The Wonderful World of Color, which is kind of the same thing, but made by Walt Disney, where Walt Disney would talk about his different rides and attractions as well as his animations. I believe. I've never seen The Wonderful World of Color. Anyway, Joey takes a quick liking to Rose and decides to promote her from whatever the heck she was doing, which I'm not entirely sure what that was, to an assistant to help out with the Joey Drew Show. I'm not entirely sure what she was doing as an assistant. I think it was like just bringing in sandwiches and stuff. It wasn't that important to the story overall, which is why I don't remember it. So seeing as it's her job, she's sent to go find coffee. She doesn't know where the coffee is, so she ends up wandering around for a little bit. She eventually wanders into some office somewhere and finds some blueprints and these glasses. She almost sits on the glasses. They were put on a stool right in front of the blueprints. And out of the darkness comes this guy named Evan. He becomes significant later. Basically, Emma was kind of mad at her because she almost sat on the glasses. And then Joey Drew shows up and he just tells Rose to go find the coffee. So I laid that all out a lot less dramatically than it was written, but Rose thinks she's going to be fired because of all this. I'd also like to mention real quick, because I can't remember where it was, but I don't remember why. But she went down this alleyway to investigate something. When she came back, there was this creepy man in a trench coat standing right in front of her, who becomes important later, and I can't remember when it was in the story, but I feel like now is a good time to mention it. So, remember, man in a trench coat. Very important. Anyway, Rose returns back to work and finds out she's not going to be fired. Instead, Joey ends up giving her a TV and some glasses so she can watch the Joey Drew Show. And these glasses and this TV are very special. And it's the same glasses she almost sat on. But they're very special, and I'll explain what they are in like 2 seconds. So, because a lot of people in Rose's neighborhood don't have TVs, her and her family decide to have like this watching party after they do eventually get the TV. So the TV arrives, they have the watching party, and mostly it's Rose's brother, Ollie, short for Oliver, who uses the glasses the most. So, now let's talk about what the TV and the glasses are specifically. So basically, how the glasses work is you watch the Joey Drew Show, and you put on the glasses, and basically, it's like VR. You are teleported into the show, right? They're advertised as 3D glasses, but basically they're virtual reality. So, this TV, it only shows the Joey Drew Show because it has to be a very specific TV to work with the very specific glasses. So, basically, you're in VR, you're watching the show, basically, in VR. Now, even though the TV shows it in black and white, because that's what we had back then, the glasses have a tint on them that makes everything black and yellow, and that's very important for later. But that's how the glasses work, basically. How? I don't know, man. I didn't make them. Ink magic, obviously. And dark spirits. Also, the Joey Drew Show is only on Saturdays, and this whole book takes place within 2 weeks. So they only ever actually watch the show twice. You know, saying this out loud, it might have been 3 times. But it's not significant. The point is they're not watching the show every single day. 2 quick things I want to mention real quick. First of all, Rose is very optimistic and tries to see the best in people and situations, which doesn't have that much impact on the story, but it is significant for something coming up. And another thing, her dad has some PTSD from the war. Not that that's very significant to the story, I just thought I'd mention it. And I would have put this all at the beginning, but I can't figure out how to put the audio at the beginning, because I'm using CamCut instead of iMovie, which iMovie I usually use. This is my first time actually using CamCut. So I gotta fiddle around with that for a little bit. Anyway, moving on. So Rose returns to work the next day, and her and Evan are sitting in front of the elevator door waiting to go somewhere. And the elevator door's open, and Evan's about to go in, but Rose realized there's no elevator there, and if Evan keeps going, he's gonna fall all the way down the elevator shaft. So she pulls him back, and Evan is grateful in his own way, and I'll think of a way to describe him in a minute. But they end up going to lunch together and talking about some things. Nothing very significant, but they do end up talking. So basically, they go to this cafe, and they get to talking. Evan feels like Rose is way too optimistic, and that she should be more serious, and that's the word I was looking for. Evan is very serious and very easily annoyed with everyone. He's just that person who's just annoyed with the world in general. He's not mean, per se. He's just easily annoyed and very serious. And so while they're talking at lunch, we learn that Evan used to work for Gent before it closed in 1952. And they mention it closed in 1952 later. I'm just mentioning it now. And I'm now remembering, after talking, that while they were having lunch, they're in this little cafe. Rose sees a guy wearing sunglasses inside, mind you, watching them from a corner. And that is the same guy she ends up seeing in the alleyway, which I'm pretty sure it happens after work this day, the same day she rescued Evan from the elevator shaft. 2 more things before we move on. 1, Evan made the glasses, and 2, Rose takes an interest in learning mechanical engineering, and she said that she could go to school for it, and Evan says, nah, they teach you what you already know, I'll teach you. And he says that, and then he proceeds to never teach her anything. He barely does it once, but then never again. It was just a reason for Rose to pop by Evan's office a singular time, mind you. So, moving on. After work, she thinks that she saw Bendy down one of the alleyways, and something I haven't mentioned yet, and what is heavily implied, is that the glasses and the TV show that they're watching, that Rose and Olive watched, make you hallucinate things. So the whole book, Rose keeps seeing Bendy randomly in different places. So she thinks she saw Bendy down an alleyway, so she goes to investigate, and then when she turns around, the man in the trench coat, wearing the sunglasses at night, mind you, is behind her. So she manages to get around this guy and back to the subway station, who, by the way, this man in the trench coat has an English accent. They make a point to mention that, and that's significant for who he is. But anyway, she gets around him back to the subway station, and he doesn't actually follow her this time. He just kind of sits at the end of the street as she runs, menacingly. So yeah, she gets back to the subway station okay, for now. So something I forgot to mention is after Evan and Rose got back from lunch, Joey ends up walking with both of them, but mostly Rose, up these staircases to get to the floor they're trying to get to, because the elevator's broken, you know? We don't want people falling down elevator shafts, but anyway, they have to take the stairs, and Evan ends up getting ahead, but Joey asks Rose to go to a party that they're having for like the Joey Drew show. They're having a singing party or something, but she gets invited to a party, basically. And here's the thing, I can't remember anything important between the sketchy guy in the alleyway and the party, so we're just going to skip to the party. I hope that's okay with everyone. And if it isn't too bad, because nothing very important to the rest of the plot really happens. So the party is at Nathan Arch's house. He also lives in New York, because Nathan Arch is the one who owns the Joey Drew show. Obviously, Joey is the one running it, like, hosting it, but Nathan Arch is the one with the money, like I mentioned at the beginning, helping out his old war buddy, Joey Drew. So Rose gets to this party, and supposedly Evan was going to be there, but he's not. So she ended up finding Joey Drew, rather, Joey Drew found her, and Joey Drew introduces her to Allison, the voice of Alice Angel. So they end up chatting for just a little bit before Rose goes upstairs to watch the Joey Drew show, because some random, I don't even know what to call it, it's the guy who, like, carries around the drinks on the trays. He just kind of shows up, and he's like, hey, anyone who's interested in watching the Joey Drew show, they have a TV set up in the library. And so Rose goes and watches the Joey Drew show. So, while she's watching the show, she notices someone in the corner of the library, at the corner of her eye. And it is none other than Wilson Arch. He is just sitting in the corner with the illusion of living in his hand, watching her menacingly. You know, honestly, that's pretty on point for Wilson. But anyway, so she sits down and watches the show with the glasses, mind you, for like a total of 2 seconds before Evan shows up out of the blue, rips the glasses off of her face, and takes her out of the library. Outside the library, Evan proceeds to throw the glasses on the ground and stomp on them, shattering them. So then Joey shows up, and he ends up firing Evan. And Rose kind of does try and cover for Evan, saying that she accidentally stepped on the glasses, but it's pretty heavily implied that Joey knows it was all Evan's fault. So after that whole fiasco, Rose ends up leaving the party. Outside of Nathan Archer's house, Rose meets, yet again, Trenchcoat Dude, who this time ends up chasing Rose all the way to the subway station. At the subway station, Rose is getting ready to board the next train that gets into the station. She is ready and raring to just jump into it. No questions asked. So she tries to do that when the train shows up, and she's immediately pulled back by the guy in the trench coat, who then explains to her that she was about to jump off into the tracks. So Rose comes down and gets a good look at this guy who has this inky black hair that I think it mentions that it looks like ink or something, and these jet black eyes. Like, you would think that they are holes if it wasn't for the light reflecting off of them. She also gets this guy's name, who is none other than Archie Carter. Let me play you his voice line real quick for anyone who hasn't played Dark Revival and or just skipped all the audio logs, which I totally understand, but here's his singular audio log real quick.
I don't like to ask questions. I believe everyone's got their own business. You hear something, you leave it alone. But when you've spent as much time in and out of a jug as I have, you learn to keep your mouth shut about things, you know? So when I saw this here ad in a newspaper that reads, Gent Corporation looking for research subjects pays $3.50 a week, I figured it'd be good for me. Easy money, right? With my record, you can't afford to be picky. But it turns out something really wrong is going on in this place. I mean, I've seen dead people before, but here, death is like a way of life. A clockwork march. They wheel out the bodies, and they disappear down the chute. Forgotten men from the street, paid to die. $3.50 a week.
So, right before Rose leaves the subway station, she looks to her left or something, and it says Silver Lane Express, which, if you don't remember, is the creepy ghost train you can witness in Dark Revival if you stand at that one platform at 4:14. And I tested it, it's not just at 4:14 a.m., it's also at 4:14 p.m. But, and the more I think about this, I can't decide if she hallucinated because of the ink, which is plausible, or if the actual ghost train is actually in New York. And I will talk about why the actual ghost train being in New York would be kind of weird. I mean, it wouldn't be weird, but it's confusing to me, and I shouldn't ponder it right now or ever, because I'll get down a rabbit hole and we'll just spiral. So after this entire incident, Rose decides that she needs to get The Illusion of Living, which is that book by Joey Drew, his memoir, because she thinks it'll explain what is going on. It doesn't, and we'll get to that, but she thinks it'll explain why she's hallucinating all these things. So, Rose, she sets out on a mission, a quest, if you will, to find the illusion of living. She calls all these stores and whatnot, and eventually she gets a call back from one of them saying that they have the illusion of living. I forget where it was. It's not very important, but she is told to ask for Dot. So Rose goes to the bookstore and finds Dot, and they both go over to a diner where Dot proceeds to interrogate Rose about why she wants the illusion of living. She also tells Rose to get away from Joey Drew as quickly as possible because she knows what went down in the studio back in 1946. And I'm going to talk about that in a few seconds right after I read this passage, because this passage from the book, it's hard to explain. I can't explain it, which is why I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to give it some context for those of you who have never read Dreams Come to Life or need some reminders from that book. And I'll put some yellow on the screen for those of you who don't want me to spoil it, because I can read this and it'll make sense on its own. But for those of you who don't want me to spoil it, I'll put like yellow or something. Anyway, let's read this passage real quick. Also, you guys have the right to know that I do have a stutter, especially when I read, because I like to read words that don't exist. So, if this is going really bad, I'll just plug this into the British robot, the one, that always reads the memes. We'll plug it into that, and we'll have him read it for you. Anyway, moving on. Dot took in a deep, shivering breath. She calmed herself. I'll be plain with you. There was a monster, a real monster, not a metaphorical one or a man who behaved monstrously, but somehow an actual beast of a monster. Impossible, I said, because it was. Yes, it ought to be. It really ought to be. She lowered her voice to almost a whisper. I just know somehow Bendy is real, and he's not cute. Bendy? The idea of Bendy being real hit too close to home for me. Dot nodded. She kept talking in a low voice, drawing me in. The monster. It's this large, twisted version of Bendy. He's huge, with his grin and he has claws and sharp teeth, a long, lean, inky body, and a whale. I'm sorry, I need to stop. I could see she was shaking, physically shaking. Again, instinct took over me. I stood and went over to her. I bent over and hugged her. I held her as she shook in my grasp. I felt like I was holding Ollie from one of his nightmares. It killed Buddy, Dot said into my arms. She was crying now. It tried to kill me, but he saved me, and it killed him. And I didn't know what happened to it. I didn't know what happened to him. She pulled away and looked up at me, her eyes red, her face wet. I ran away. I was so scared. I would be too. I felt like crying myself after seeing her like this. No, not from the creature, from Mr. Drew. I couldn't stay there. I knew he knew. He knew I knew. Did he know about the Bendy monster? Dot pushed me away, not violently, but forcefully enough that I could see I had upset her. You don't understand. You don't. I'm really trying to. Joey Drew made the monster. She was staring at me with fire in her eyes, pure white-hot hatred. No, that's not possible, I said. You just think a Bendy monster appears out of thin air? Of course not. Though now I did wonder. Did Dot have puddles of her own? Was there maybe a kind of madness that happened to you when you worked for Joey? There's a machine. It's called the ink machine. Mr. Drew had it made and brought to the studio. That's where the monster was born. A machine? Yes. She watched as I returned to my seat. She was keeping such a close eye on me, I felt almost naked. You don't believe me. I believe you believe it, I said slowly. I didn't look at her. My mind was going a mile a minute. I could barely trust my own perception of things these days. How on earth could I trust Dot's? Dot. Her eyes were all fire. Or his grandfather's grave, maybe. The man survived untold horrors during the war, but died from a heartbreak losing his grandson. He was very real. His tombstone very real. Or shall we break into the old studio? I know it's been boarded up. No one else has moved in it. Why wouldn't they, do you think? It's prime real estate after all. Okay, that was the passage I wanted to read to you guys. So this is the point in the video where I break it down. But real first, I found this amazing image that basically is the way they describe Bendy. Look at that. I mean, ignoring the fact of how large he is, that is about how they describe him. They always describe him with sharp teeth. He has the flattest teeth, which leads me to my theory. He's really a herbivore. He eats plants. That's why he's got flat teeth. It's obvious. Think. Anyway, this is the point where we break down everything that I just said and give some context from The Dreams Come to Life. Okay, so you have Dreams Come to Life. You have our main protagonist, Buddy Lewick. His name is actually Daniel, by the way. He got the nickname Buddy. That's not important. Okay, so he meets Dot. They both work at Joey Drew's studio back in 1946. So they mill around the studio, having zany adventures, and one day, they're up in the music department, and they see this violinist. She dies, and she's all covered in ink. And it's weird. And Dot wants to figure out what happened and why the violinist died. And they actually mention that in the book, I just didn't get to that part. Buddy, on the other hand, just wants to get through the day and get his check because he's living on the Lower East Side. And he doesn't have all that much money. So he just wants to get his paycheck, do his job, and go home. So he kind of gets sucked into this, I suppose. And he accidentally releases the ink demon into the studio. The ink demon's like in this random ass back room, I think in the music department? No. It was the infirmary, I think. It's been a little bit. Okay, so he releases the ink demon and it's running around the studio. Okay, fast forward to the end of the book. There's this big showdown with Dot and Buddy against the ink demon, and the ink machine is there, I believe, but that's not important. Okay, so basically what happens is they vanish the ink demon into a puddle, I suppose, and it ends up grabbing Buddy and dragging him down into the inky depths where he drowns. And Dot, she runs away, because, that's the logical thing to do. But what we know that Dot doesn't know, if you've read Dreams Come to Life, is that Buddy did live, and he became a Boris. Something I do need to say, so his soul was taken out of his body and put into a Boris. It was weird, because I remember it said that he was looking down at his dead body as a Boris. So I guess the ink machine takes your soul, and it puts it into the cartoon, and it leaves your body there to die. Anyway, on that wonderful note, that is everything you need to know for Dreams Come to Life. Let's move on. So Doc gives Rose The Illusion of Living, and Rose goes home and reads it all night and learns literally nothing important. Just like me. That book was not worth it. And then she goes back to the studio where apparently everyone had the day off and Joey is acting more crazy than usual. So Joey's there alone having an argument with Henry Stein, who's not actually there because Joey is mentally ill. Yeah. So on the show, they have this model of the studio, and this is very important. The model is not actually 100% of the studio. They had to rearrange things so they would fit, and they had to take some creative liberties, I guess is what they said, which I'm not entirely sure what that means. But I think that it's not exactly like the studio, but it's very close, and that'll become important later. So I can't remember, I believe Joey's still acting kind of crazy when he does this, but he takes Rose down to the basement, and lo and behold, the ink machine is there. All good things. So Joey spouts some BS about what an innovative marvel the ink machine is or something, and then he leaves, and Rose is there alone for like 5 seconds, and she goes to the door, and it's locked, apparently. And then Joey opens it like a page later and is like, oh, I'm sorry, I was just joking, man. It was all for good fun. Honestly, that entire scene just really reminisces of this point in Dreams Come to Life. I keep going back to it. But, so there was this auditorium that Joey bought to expand, despite being bankrupt. Not bankrupt, but low on money. But anyway, he bought this auditorium, and him and Buddy are on this catwalk looking down at the stage, watching a show. So what he does is he pushes Buddy over the railing, but grabs him back by his shirt, and he tells him, like, oh, I'm sorry, buddy, it was a bad joke. Yeah, that's what that reminds me of. That was the thing I thought when I read that. I was like, man, that's kind of like that part in Dreams Come to Life. Anyway, moving on. Let's get back to, I believe we're at the part with Archie Carter. So Rose told Archie Carter that she would talk to Joey about getting Joey to talk to Archie Carter, if that'll make sense. So she told Joey that Archie wanted to talk to him. And Joey didn't want to because Archie was involved with Gent because he wasn't like a part of Gent, but he worked for Gent as an experiment, if you remember that tape. So Joey's not going to, which is what happened. So Rose goes to the diner and tells Archie, Joey's not going to come see you. And I believe before she went to the diner, she also called up Dot and told Dot to come to the diner and talk to Archie. And that is where we are now with Archie. So they're all at the diner, and Archie explains his terrible tale about how he was experimented on in the labs of the Gent Inc. facilities. So they had this big group of people that they hired to experiment on, and they would inject them with this stuff, and then they'd sometimes put them in these rooms, these closed-off rooms, probably tight rooms, and fill the bottom with ink. Because, reasons. Science. It's for science. Don't even get that part with the ink. Anyway, and then stuff started to go south for Gent, and they started locking everyone up. So Archie escaped by swimming through the pipes, as realistic as that is. Though, he has been to prison a few times, apparently, so, yeah, that's probably where he learned that skill. Let's not question it, shall we? So Archie does mention the ink machine a few times, and then Rose remembers, oh, I saw the ink machine the other day. And so they all devise this plan to go destroy the ink machine. Now, to get down to the ink machine room, one needs a key. Now, how does one acquire such a key? Well, here's how they do it. So, Rose goes up to the person who was originally going to be her boss, who she was going to work for, and she asks for the key to, I don't know, it was like the broom closet or something. Anyway, the point is she gets a key, right, that somehow opens the basement and a broom closet. Maybe it's a skeleton key. Anyway, she gets a key. And she, in under an hour, uses 1953 technology to make a copy of this key. Now, I don't know how they made keys back in 1953. My 10 seconds of Google search do not give me much good information. But in under an hour, she makes a copy of a key, and now she has a key. I'm sure no one would exploit this system, try and get the keys to, I don't know, say a vault. Anyway, she has a key now. So before Rose goes to meet up with Archie and Dot, her brother Ollie, who has been hallucinating Bendy, and Bendy has been telling him to do these really weird things, like jump out the window because he can fly, and other stuff. So Bendy, I don't even know what he told him, but the point is, Ollie cuts the mom with a knife, not fatally, but she is injured. So the dad takes the mom to the hospital, and it's Rose and Ollie alone. Rose locks Ollie in his room, and she goes next door to get the neighbor, whose name I forget, to watch Ollie. And she tells the neighbor not to let Ollie watch the TV, and to not watch the TV herself, because, like I said before, it's the TV with the, I didn't actually say this before, so the TV is causing Ollie to hallucinate because the glasses and Joey Drew, who has apparently, I forgot to mention this, been running the show through the ink machine, which is why he has it in the basement, and I forgot to mention that. So, with that wonderful note, Ollie's in his room, neighbor's downstairs, Rose is out the door leaving him, and they're off to go destroy the ink machine. So Rose meets up with Dot and Archie, and they head down to the basement to dismantle and destroy the ink machine. Before they have the chance to do so, they encounter Evan, who is, I choke you not, gonna move the ink machine out of the basement one pipe at a time. He has a pipe under his arm. He is just gonna move it one pipe at a time out of the basement, because he has decided that Joey is unfit to wield its power. And he's gonna restart the Gent Company all on his own with the power of the ink machine. Not like with the power of the ink machine, but he is gonna restart the Gent Company and make it great again. Archie doesn't like that, though, because Archie's not entirely stable. He's stable enough, but not in this scenario, because he does not like Evan, because Evan is a part of Gent, so he proceeds to knock Evan out, take Evan's pipe, and go down to beat the shit out of the ink machine, which is a beautiful image, may I say, him beating the shit out of the ink machine. It is all for naught, because the ink demon shows up out of absolutely nowhere, and Archie decides he's gonna lead it away. So he runs off into the darkness and gets consumed by the ink, basically. Dot and Rose run up, I believe they were, on stairs. They're up these stairs, and they're trying to drag Evan up the stairs, but he gets stuck in the ink, so they have to leave him too. So now it's just Dot and Rose. And I can't remember why, but Rose heads back to her house without Dot. She heads back to her house, where she finds Ollie sit in front of the TV watching it with the glasses. So Rose has to take the glasses from Ollie because he's in this trance. He's stuck in the TV universe. I don't know. And she takes the glasses off of him, she puts it on, she's going to go into the inky world to get him back. I feel like I need to mention this again, because I kind of mentioned it real briefly. The show is being run through the ink machine. I forgot to mention that in the moment, but it is being run through the ink machine, and that is very important. Here's where it becomes significant. So Rose enters the yellow-tinted world of the Joey Drew show, and she's inside the cartoon right now. She's experiencing it, and she wanders off. And after some wandering, she finds herself in the studio, and I believe she went through a void of some sort, which answers some questions that I've been thinking of, but we'll talk about that in a second. So she finds herself in the studio, which Joey was going to put in the show. You guys remember that when he was acting crazy? So yeah, here's the studio. And she wanders for a little bit longer, and she finds the group of people that have all been selected to test the show. Ollie's there, some random-ass people are there. Some guy named Michael. I only remember his name because Michael Afton. Also, Archie is there too, and he's basically become a lost one at this point. So all these people are trying to hide from the ink demon, so they gotta stay quiet. But, I believe it was like a tape recorder, like the ones you find in the game, like these ones. It starts, like, talking, and it's Joey's voice coming through it. So Joey basically tells them that they were all a part of his experiment. So he doesn't say it like that, but he says it like, oh, I am a man of science after all. And he's going to keep all these people in this world. And he's explaining to them that this world isn't real, therefore they can't feel pain. And Archie pitches in saying that that's not true and that Joey is full of shit, which he often is, but Joey doesn't care, so he, leaves. He just, I don't know, he stops recording, because it's a live recording. He's, actually talking to them through the recording. It's not a pre-made recording. It's actually him talking through, and we should not question how that even works, because it'll cause me to spiral down a rabbit hole of insanity. So now all these people are trapped there, and they're gonna try and get out, and they do in the end, but Archie has to stay behind because he's not hooked in through the glasses. He's, stuck in the ink world forever, I suppose. It's very sad for everyone. But everyone does get out. Rose gets out, Ollie gets out, and that's the end of the book. I didn't really explain that last part very well, but, so Joey's created this world, right? Through his TV show that he's running through the ink machine, and that is it's not said explicitly, but we can probably assume that it's the ink loop that everyone's in, like Henry and Audrey and other people. That's what that world is. Also, supposedly in this world, you can't die. And Archie says that, yeah, I can't die, but I can, relive this pain over and over again. But they can't die in this world. And I suppose Joey's just going to keep all these people here because he can. I don't know. I'm not remembering things very well. Also, he says at some point, and I can't find it, to actually read it, because I kind of wanted to. He says that wandering is a terrible sin, which is kind of fun reference. And one more thing about this ink world is, inside of it, I think I mentioned this, there are these black, empty parts that are just voids, right? Because this isn't a real world, it's one that's been created. So there are parts of it that are just nothingness, where nothing has been created. So it's just this black void, So, yeah, there are those parts, which I'd like to imagine, behind those locked doors that are sometimes in, Dark Revival and Bendy the Ink Machine, that just behind those are just a black nothingness. Which is kind of a creepy concept, but it makes me feel satisfied. So I'm going to talk about the ink loop for a little bit longer. I'm going to break it down in case I didn't explain it that well. And then I'm going to do a quick review of this book. So I guess this is basically the theorizing part. Welcome to Game Theories. So Joey had this show that he was running through his ink machine. And by doing that, he has created an alternate reality that is tinted yellow and is basically the ink loop that we know from Bendy the Ink Machine and Bendy the Dark Revival. I still think this world is contained within the ink machine. And I think what Joey does with this world, which is something that's been theorized for a while, is that he's collected up all the people who used to work with him and just shoved them into this ink loop, kind of like he did with Archie Carter. And like what Wilson did to Audrey. Just drowns them in the ink, and that somehow transfers their consciousness, I suppose, into the inky world. Something I'd also like to say is that Bendy can move between the ink world and the real world. And I'm not going to get into the logic behind that, because, I get how... I don't get exactly how, but if I get into how he can't, more recently, like in Bendy the Ink Machine, I don't think that Bendy is going between the two worlds. So either he's just choosing not to, or somehow Joey has bound him to the ink machine, and I don't need to contemplate that, because again, rabbit hole, spiraling, insanity. I don't have the brain cells for that kind of thinking. Anyway, I hope I didn't make anything more confusing than it has to be. If anyone has some questions, just put them down in the comments. I do see those, and I do try and respond. Anyway, let's get to my review of this book. So when I saw this book at Vintage Stock, the first thought I had was, I didn't even know they were making another Bendy book. I saw nothing about it. 2, I read the back of it, and I'm not going to read the back of it, but I didn't think I knew this book would suck. Okay, I knew it would suck. I felt it in my heart, in my bones. But then, around the point where Joey makes note that the world, like, when you put on the 3D glasses, is yellow tinted, that's when I started to think maybe this book wouldn't completely suck. And honestly, I feel like it did tie itself together. It did kind of explain how the ink loop came to be and what it is, which I probably didn't explain it as well as I could have. But it did explain it, and it had Dot from Dreams Come to Life, and it had Archie Carter, who was a character I really wanted to learn more of, because, reasons. Okay, let's list the reasons. He's British and he's voiced by Super Horror Bros. Those are the only 2 reasons. And I don't know. From his audio recording, it feels like he had a story to tell. I feel like everyone had a story to tell, but especially him, because he's British. I don't know, maybe I'm discriminating against everyone else who's not British. But it's kind of cool that a character that was probably put in that game to be a cameo for Super Horror Bros actually got to be a main important character. And if you really think about it, he was the first victim of, the ink loop. He was the first person to be put in there after Bendy. But Bendy's not real. I mean, he is real, but he's not like a human being with a soul. Though I've been thinking about that soul thing. I feel like Bendy, he doesn't have a human soul, but he has a kind of soul. Though we've kind of retconned Bendy a little bit, so maybe that soul thing doesn't matter anymore. I shouldn't think about it. Also, speaking of Super Horror Bros, I hope he does a video on this book. Because, I don't know what's going on in Britain or England or wherever the hell it's called, whatever the hell it's called. But apparently they were taking a while to get the Lost Ones released over there, from what he was saying in one of his really old videos. I remember he said, when Lost Ones comes out in England or Britain, he was going to do a video on it. Still hasn't done a video. And they've released like a 3rd Bendy book. I don't feel like he has an excuse anymore, because we have the interwebs and you can just find a read aloud to it, like an audiobook. So, I kind of understand why he didn't do Lost Ones, because Lost Ones sucked. And I'm going to talk about Lost Ones real quick in a minute. But, I feel like he should do this one, especially because Archie Carter's in it, character he voiced. But anyway, moving on. I like this book. This book was good. I was really worried it was going to be another Lost Ones. I was. Speaking of which, let's talk about Lost Ones. So, you had the first book, Dreams Come to Life, that took place in the studio, had a character working at the studio, exploring the studio, doing things in the studio, at a relevant time in 1946. And then you had the Lost Ones, didn't even take place in New York, was about Tom Connor moving the ink machine over to Atlantic City, which is where Gent Corporation is, like the head of Gent Corporation is, to fix the ink machine because it was broken, despite the fact that Tom had already been fired by Joey Drew in Dreams Come to Life, and he was somehow rehired. Honestly, we could have done without Lost Ones. We can just pretend it didn't exist. We can do Tom got fired, Gent closed down because, Tom wasn't there anymore, and Joey ran the company to the ground trying to do his ink machine shit, and then Joey somehow obtained the ink machine, which I don't even think it's his. I think it's Gent's. I'm not one for legal battles, but anyway, Joey has the machine now. Studio's closed, Gent's closed, everyone's closed. It's 1953, and we finally get what the ink loop is. We could have done without Lost Ones. It did nothing for us. I'm sorry, I'm misremembering. It did do something for us. It explained to us, drumroll please, that the ink makes you crazy. What do I mean? Well, you had these people exposed to the ink from the ink machine. I guess they were exposed to the ink machine and the ink. But anyway, you had Constance, who kept to herself, didn't voice her opinions that often, ended up having a lot of outbursts because she had built up anger. I know what that's like. You had Bill, who was scared, being really scared. You had Brant, who was feeling guilty about things, feeling really guilty. And then you had the cockroach. Yes, the cockroach, who wanted to escape the jar that Constance put it in to, study it. The cockroach who wanted to escape the jar, really wanted to escape the jar, and then it died. Let's put this all into context, shall we? Who do we know? What character do we know that's kind of crazy, obsessive about something, that became even more obsessive after they were exposed to the ink? My character that I think of is Susie Campbell, voice of Alice Angel. She was, I would say, she had an unhealthy obsession with the character that she voiced. And when she became the twisted Alice that she was, the one with the face missing, she became really crazy. So crazy that she brutally murdered Boris's and Butcher Gang members to eat their hearts and become beautiful again. Yeah, that is basically everything I learned. And honestly, the book didn't make that much sense to begin with, because here's what happened. So when Dreams Come to Life, Tom got fired, not like from Gent, but Joey fired him, and he could no longer work on the ink machine, I suppose. And then the next book, which is still in 1946, Tom is back working with the ink machine. He's moving the big-ass thing over to Atlantic City, New Jersey, to work on it, because that's where the Gent head of corporation is, or like the main place, for Gent. Like all those corporations, they have like the main building. That's where Gent's main building place is. Okay, here's what we could have done with Lost Ones. We could just have not done it. Tom got fired. Allison left with him because love and all that shit. The studio is under investigation, probably because Buddy Lewick went missing. This is still 1946. 3 years later, studio goes under. They can't find anyone to replace Allison to voice Alice Angel. And, the studio closes because of Joey Drew and his BSing and the ink machine. Gent also goes under. And I don't know, maybe there's some, big something lawsuit case for who has custody over the ink machine. And, Joey wins because Joey does. And that's just what happens. We don't have to do the Lost Ones where Tom is rehired, probably fired again, because from the way he described himself in the Lost Ones, because there's this epilogue part where it wasn't the epilogue, but there are these parts, these chapters that are just Tom talking about himself and the ink machine. He did not strike me as the person to leave Joey. He strikes me as the person who would just be with it because, the ink machine is his and all that, and he's going to try and fix it. He would just be with it until the day he dies, maybe. I don't think he would leave on his own. Anyway, I had a rant there. I'm sorry. I feel very strongly about Lost Ones. Anyway, I am done now. Thank you for watching my video. Subscribe, I guess, or don't. I don't care. And I will see you probably next year, because I probably will not make any more videos before the end of the year. I might finish up me and my brother reacting to the MatPat Timeline, but other than that, I'm probably done for this year. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year's, all that good stuff. Bye.